All right, I just want to cover kind of a few kind of points related to the needs assessment for the coming week, and talk a little bit about some of the other issues kind of related to the class. One thing I want to explain is the that I'm sorry if it's caused confusion, but the roof foundation kind of orientation. This class was founded with the idea of actually writing a grant that you were going to submit, and I think that's a great idea. Although even in the past when other people have taught the course, they've never really forced you to submit the grant, or like nothing in the class would be ever dependent on whether or not you got funding or anything like that. The problem that arose with that structure, though, is that like they mentioned in the chapter for this week, sometimes like National Endowment for the Arts grants don't have a needs section, or for a large federal grant they might require 40 or 50 pages, just different kind of guidelines. So the idea with the roof foundation is to have a clear kind of established set of guidelines that apply to all students, and so that it's the grading's fair and equitable, and that we make sure we cover all the parts of a grant. But I do really hope that you write with the intention of submitting an actual grant, and that is how I evaluate things. Like I am looking at this like, is this a reasonable proposal? Does this even have a chance at maybe getting funded? Like I do come at the proposals through the lens of the idea that you're going to submit this, and is this a viable project? Again, so that things are sort of fair and equitable across the board in terms of how everything's being assessed. I wanted to mention really quick with the writing grants, one of the things that happens is you kind of build over time too. That's the other benefit of actually submitting something. Grants are opportunities are often very competitive. It can be difficult to get funded when you're starting out. But eventually you learn the tips, you learn the tricks, how to do the tables, you learn the data sources, you have a lot of times like formatted things. So like your organizational structure, your CV, once you get those things developed, then it's easy to just kind of, slot those things into the grant. So grant writing is something that you really gain momentum at and get better at over time. And then a lot of times when you don't get funded, you get feedback, you get information, and then you can use that and go back, and it helps you kind of develop. One quick thing I want to mention is that from last week, this week, and moving forward, you guys will submit things as one document. So what that means is you'll actually begin to submit it like a proposal. So just save a Word document, and like next week when you do goals and objectives, you'll have that section after your needs. So you're developing everything in one document. And that helps me, and this is kind of connected to what I wanted to talk to you about with the needs statement. The kind of data you put in your needs statement will directly inform your goals and objectives, and those things should be in communication in some sense. So for an example of that would be, let's say I have a project in mind to reach out to Hispanic students, high school students in the Muncie community. Well, if you're gonna target 50 of those students, you should make it very clear that you know how many, high school students, Hispanic high school students there are at in Muncie Central. You have a very clear indication of that, and you're able to lay that out. And you say, or maybe you say there's 100 Hispanic students, and out of that 100, we're targeting 25, based on this reasoning, and you have kind of a rationale behind what you're doing. So your needs and your goals and objectives should inform one another. So when I look at that document, it's helpful to be able to go back to your needs statement and see it, and then kind of put that in alignment with your goals and objectives. Also, the other thing that's essential in this class, you'll learn a lot, one, from reading your peers' proposals, from looking at them. I learn things and I see things like, oh, I like the way they did that table or set that up, and it just helps you to kind of read over them. I learn a lot from reviewing grants. So you should go back, and then I'll be giving you feedback each week. And based on those two things, feedback from your peers, looking at their proposals, and then my feedback, you should be editing and adjusting your proposal each week, so I can look at the revisions and changes you make as we kind of go along as well. With the needs assessment, as they mentioned in the reading, I want to mention it's really important to have good data sources. And for every area that you're looking at, there's clear data and information related to the state and that are available at different levels. And I'll give you one example. If you were doing a project related to education in Muncie, the Department of Education has really easy to access data. You put in, they have a Bureau of Education Statistics that collects data on every school in the country that's entered. And so you can put in your zip code, and then it gives you the district, and then it breaks down each school. So, I mean, within 5 or 10 minutes, you can find out how many kids are at Muncie Central, the ethnic breakdown, how many students are African American, Hispanic. You can find how many kids are on free and reduced lunch, which is, as a side note, I think the primary indicator that's used in a lot of different areas for poverty. So to know how many kids are sort of at that poverty line, fully eligible for free and reduced for free lunch, and then the reduced lunch program. So that gives you the whether or not the school's Title I, how many Title Is are in the district, all those kinds of things, and that's the kind of data that's really helpful if you're working in some of the areas. The other thing that'll help you in gathering that data that's really essential, and that's in the chapter for this week, is having a target area, or they use the term target population. I always really like to emphasize a target, well, at least for some projects, a target area as well. And that is having a really clear kind of demographic area. Are you looking at Muncie? Are you looking at Delaware County? And then within that geographic location, who's your target population? And when I was working as a grant writer, a lot of times, I mean, almost always, like we would have kind of maps for different areas, and we would just include a map to kind of show the target area. In the proposal, you probably don't have room for that. It's not necessarily a good idea for a shorter grant like that. But again, that can kind of help you. One of the complexities of the needs statement, too, that I want to highlight that I don't think comes across as clearly in the reading is that I think one of the challenges, if you're writing on behalf of a nonprofit, and I even think for you, if you were like writing for a research grant, or for you personally, it's the challenge sometimes is showing, because as a grant reviewer, you always want to know that this is worth giving money to. They're not going to misuse the funds. They're not going to improperly mismanage them. They're not going to damage the reputation of our foundation. So it's showing both capacity, that you can manage a grant and get things done, but also need that and so that can be kind of a complex balance of doing that. And I would mention that I do think that with the needs statement, that you can use it as an opportunity to show some organizational capacity. You can talk a little bit about how strong the organization or you as a researcher are, or some of those things, but then kind of let them know that in this one area, and that's where the problem statement that they talk about in the chapter comes in. And then, you have this good organizational structure and this, solid track record, but you also have this problem. So another, and that's really, I think too, the other thing is, I can tell you from reading and reviewing grants that you get a lot of really, really compelling proposals. And, it's always difficult when you have so many applicants and you have this, limited amount of money to give out. So the needs section is really, really essential. I mean, it's also too one of the early sections that the reviewer reads. And so you really have to engage them and let them know that there's this problem, but it can be fixed. And that's what they want to know too, that this problem isn't so big that it's unfixable, or this is going to be a waste of money, or we don't just want to throw money at things. We want to put money where we could have an actual impact and make a difference. Another thing really quickly is that that I think you'll learn throughout the grant, and maybe the needs statement section isn't the most, serious for this, but tables really help you as a grant writer. Oftentimes in grants, one of the reasons I use them a lot is you can get away with single space in the table even when the narrative is double spaced, and or the other thing is you can really condense a lot of information, and it's a way of sort of highlighting and drawing attention to some of your most important data. So when you really have that key piece of information or data, it's helpful to kind of put it in a table. And I can tell you too, is you want the reviewer to kind of like you and appreciate you. And as a reviewer too, it's when you're looking, it's kind of scanning through really long grants, looking for key points that you're trying to kind of check off your list. You want to make sure, like, it's helpful when it's in a table and you can see it really clearly, and then too when you have to go back and kind of reference it at later points in the grant, or when you're writing up your review and things like that, it's just really helpful to have it. So you might think about using tables, and sometimes you can look and play with the formatting and try to find the best and most efficient way to use that. And the other thing I'll say is that I think that generally the way to write good grants is to put in all the information you possibly can in the section, and then edit it down so that it fits within the requirements. So you always want to stay within, you have to stay within the requirements. I can tell you that, that's another thing with reviewing grants. A lot of times the ones that went over, had the wrong font or the wrong margins or wrong page numbers, we never read them as a reviewer because they get X'd out immediately. Come in past the timeline, all those things just get you immediately disqualified, especially in federal grants. So you have to stay within the guidelines, but you always want to make sure that you're really utilizing all the space you have. You want to really do the best you can with it, because those are the kind of things that in the real world are going to set you apart from other applicants, that are going to make the reviewer feel like this is a really solid proposal. This is incredibly compelling. Those kind of things. So I think that's all I have for now. I hope this is helpful, and I'd appreciate any feedback you guys have, or if you guys have questions, I can try to address those in later videos. So.